Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have Raging Blasters, an awesome retro-styled vertical shmup. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Teradine Games, Raging Blasters originally released for Steam in January of 2021. Now, in June of 2021, we have the version we're looking at, which is the Switch port. And this title is one that I highly recommend you pick up, as I've had a lot of fun with it. There is a caveat, however, and that's at this point it's only available on the Japanese eShop. But if you're willing to take the effort to import it, then I feel it's well worth both your time and your money. So, jumping to the main menu, there's not a whole lot here, so we're just going to start the game itself. And there are two modes we can play the game in. There's an arcade mode with 3 difficulties: hard, normal, and expert. And also a caravan mode where you're setting, as it says there, it's just a 3-minute score attack, setting the best score you can in 3 minutes. Selecting your mode, we're taking to our playstyle selection. Here you can select solo, co-op, or duel. So if you've played titles like Raiden, you'd be familiar with the duel option. It's basically controlling both player 1 and player 2 with one controller. Today we'll be showing off the game in co-op mode. Selecting co-op, it basically confirms that you're playing with 2 controllers, and we launch. So the launch sequence here is rather simple. It's just basically showing our ships taking off and then our characters. You've been selected for a mission of the utmost secrecy. Your mission is to destroy the enemy. Good luck. Really basic, not much story here, but it's nice that they kind of have something there at all. So, Raging Blasters is a vertical scrolling shoot 'em up, kind of in the vein of your 16-bit styled titles along these lines. So the game itself is a vertical scrolling shoot 'em up where we're restricted to what almost feels like a 4:3 aspect ratio, but the background does fill out the entire screen. So it's not really possible to have this title be in Tate mode just because of the way that it's set up. So we have a pair of attacks that are always available to you. So you've got your forward shot, you also have a wide shot. The wide shot does fire in all 4 diagonal directions, so it's good for getting enemies that are coming from behind us, or if we have enemies coming from multiple locations on the screen, it helps for coverage with that. In addition to your main gun, there are also 5 sub-weapons we can equip. And it is also possible to change your speed as well. It starts at a default of 3, there's just one button for it, so you'll press it and wrap around from 3, 1, 2. Really the default of 2 where we start out is like kind of perfect, I feel. So it's not something that you really need to mess with. Now let's talk a little bit about our sub-weapons. So there are 4 sub-weapons total, and there are all really useful, but some more so in certain situations than others. So like the 2 we're currently equipped with right now, the red ship has the laser, the blue ship has the fire, are really useful against a lot of the bosses. The wave here, which the blue ship just equipped, is decent at handling the mobs that you fight between bosses, and the boss fights do come up. There's usually 2 bosses per stage, but there is a stage that has a boss rush later in the game where you're fighting several of the bosses throughout the course of the game. It's actually a lot of fun. Then there's also this ring, which is a fairly defensive weapon. It will cancel out enemy shots, which is something that the fire's explosion will also do. And it can also deal really heavy damage to enemies should you be willing to get up close to the bosses or whichever enemies you happen to be fighting. But basically, the quick summary there, so the wave and the homing I feel are really good for working with the mobs. The laser and the fire are really good for bosses, and the ring weapon has like a situational use. So here we find ourselves fighting the second boss of Stage 1. This one's a relatively straightforward fight where we just need to avoid the lasers, staying between them works. And with 2 players, it's actually really easy to kind of just melt through the boss's health bars. When you complete the stage, you're given bonuses for several things, including number of hits, so basically enemies destroyed, and all those crystals that we've been selecting, or rather picking up, when we destroy enemy formations or certain larger enemies, and bosses drop them as well. At the end of the stage, we get a certain bonus for all of those crystals that we've collected, provided you haven't lost any lives. If you do lose any lives, those crystals are reset down to 0. So in a co-op run, your score is combined, so those crystals will be combined as well. And that can be important to note, because if you've got one player that's at a better skill level than the other, if it's better for them to collect the crystals, as ultimately you'll want to create as high of a score as possible. And that's one of the things I have a lot of fun with this title, is just the general score attack. There is an online leaderboard, so if you're looking to kind of like max out your score to the best possible, then you can compete with the world that way, and it's really satisfying. So as I mentioned, a lot of the weapons have like really good situational uses. The homing missile is not particularly useful against this particular boss, as the shield generally protects it, save for when it opens up to fire the purple shots all around. So it's just a good example of a situation where a weapon that's really good throughout most of the stage isn't good for certain bosses. And that basically is Raging Blasters served up for your enjoyment. So the quick summary is this title is just a lot of just enjoyable, fun, vertical scrolling like action. It's fast paced, it's enjoyable, the scoring is super satisfying, the sub weapons are all fun to use. It's a game that's fun to play in co-op, but not so much in duel. And the reason I have a problem with the duel mode is because of the lack of changing the control scheme. So you're controlling the player 1 ship, the blue ship, with the left stick, and the red ship with the right stick. But your attack buttons, which are your face buttons on the Switch controller, are still the same. I would have really liked it if you were playing duel for them to have changed those buttons to the shoulder buttons. It would have made it much easier to play. It might be possible to do that by changing the buttons in the menu, but I haven't actually admittedly tried. So let's talk a little bit about the minus flavors and the plus flavors. So I am a little disappointed that it's not possible for this game to be in like Tate mode, but just the way that the gameplay screen is set up, it really wouldn't be possible. The hit confirm sound effect is also something that does get a little grating, but that's just a minor nitpick on my end. And I do wish that there was a little more variety to the gameplay as well. One thing to note though is, or rather not so much the gameplay, but the enemies that we fight throughout the course of the gameplay. One thing that I do want to note, between this version and the Steam version, so the Switch version is actually significantly more colorful. Admittedly, this is just basing it largely off of the trailer video, but most of the enemies are relatively flat and gray on the Steam version, whereas the Switch version, you've got all this like color and detail, which just makes this game really like pop, and I really appreciate just the visual look that the game has. I just wish there were a few more enemies for us to see and ultimately like fight against. On the plus side, I just really like the fun, simple like gameplay that this title has. The scoring is relatively basic, just collecting the crystals. There is also a chain system that goes on, but it's satisfying at the same time. And then there's just that awesome retro feel that this title has, and I don't know, just playing it just puts a smile on my face. So this is one that I highly recommend you pick up. As I mentioned, at this time it's only on the Japanese eShop, but for the Nintendo Switch, but there is also the Steam version, and I highly suspect we'll see this title globally before too long, as it already is available in 8 languages on the Nintendo Switch, so language is not going to be a barrier of entry to you playing this title. Alright, so that'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for joining us this week, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.